So today we talk with Brenda Gilbert, the co-founder and president of BRON Studios. Brenda and her husband Aaron are the leaders behind a behemoth creative motion pictures machine that is BRON. Produced great films such as Joker, Queen and Slim, Greyhound, Judas and the Black Messiah, The Mule, The Willoughbys, and many, many more scripted, non-scripted, and animated pictures. Thank you so much for joining us today, Brenda.
Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. It's honestly an honor to have you on the podcast. Some of the dialogue that you and I have had back and forth over the years, and watching the level of excellence that you and BRON has continued to perform at has been nothing short of inspiring. So as our audience knows, we really get right into it. So I'll kick it off with getting your take on what would Brenda and BRON say is your philosophy or practice to best manage a creative team?
That's a really good question. I mean, it definitely starts with the team itself, and what we've tried to do at BRON has been more than a nation's worth of work. So it's a village doing more than, a nation's worth of work or a continent's worth of work, and really looking at the team in terms of obviously their experience, their expertise and knowledge that they bring into BRON, but also how do they contribute to the culture of the company that both my husband and I have tried to facilitate. And by that I mean is, trying to get away from politics and bureaucracy, really encouraging, and facilitating collaboration, which is really, really important to us. Communication is a big thing in terms of being receptive to feedback, which is really, really important on both sides, not just from, our side. And I know that for a lot, it's hard to have that sort of feedback because we sometimes take things personally, and we just have to be mindful of deadlines and bids and quotas that need to be done. So I think that what you had said in terms of being this sort of bohemic sort of, I can't remember your words exactly, of excellence, I think that we still have a lot of work to do. There's a lot of things that we can do in terms of the mediums that we sort of play in terms of storytelling, and the contributing factors are our team and our team members, in terms of pushing for excellence, in terms of doing better, in terms of also trying to make storytelling educational, I think is really important to us as well, and having a genuine and authentic narrative. A lot of times people ask me what was, our inspiration. How did you go from an office or, an idea from your home to, multiple offices, globally? And it wasn't something that we had really planned out. It just sort of happened because we felt that there was a need to do so. And if you said to me, 10, 20, 30 years, or as a young child, that you were going to be part of 38 Academy Award nominations and 6 Academy wins, and also be part of over 250 Film Festival Award nominations, I'd kind of laugh at you, to be honest with you, because you never think that far in advance. You never think that about yourself. And truly, it's the people that you bring into a company, the people that you want to work side by side with. It's really people that really understand your philosophy and what you're trying to do in terms of the art of storytelling. So I hope that answered your question.
For sure. Yeah. 3 things. I'll kind of go as a blanket overview, and then we can dive into whichever makes sense of those. The first thing that really stood out, as you mentioned, is communication, right? Which is humans being humans. One of the most complex things, if not the most complex, dealing with your partner in business, in personal life, and stakeholders, whether it be talent or production team, vendors. It's that communication that, especially at the level that you operate at the level, honestly, that in this 21st century we all work in, social media, digital, like it's a lot of communication, and there's a lot of opportunities for both connecting and for the game of telephone, things to be misconstrued. And so it's a big question, but I'm curious with that, how, I guess, would you, what is your day-to-day structure, I guess, for managing the self kind of communication, like what you need to put out there to your team, to collaborators, and the communication that happens internally, because our show is about activating our audience, and the first part of that I always say is we need to activate ourselves with our life story, our purpose, our families, our why. And with all this noise and at the same time trying to appease and deliver value to an audience, to stakeholders, how does Brenda and how do you, best suggest managing that internal communication to be in touch with what is with one's needs, and the communication that obviously is necessary to keep things moving along in a team?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, it starts with me, and that took me a lot of time, a lot of reflection, and I think the pandemic helped me do that in a weird way. I know that people talk about the silver linings of the pandemic, despite the travesty of, lots of losses and illness and whatnot, but I think it gave me time to really reflect on me and what I wanted to do, and not just in terms of the content, but also who I wanted to sort of bring on and align with in terms of the types of projects that I wanted to put out there. So I think, like I said, first and foremost, it starts with you looking in the mirror and saying, okay, what am I going to do today? So I do always make a checklist of certain things that I want to accomplish, and also making sure that we look into a mirror that's not broken. Because it starts with self-worth, and you can't, you're sort of doing yourself a disservice if you can't see the positive attributes in yourself. And that's really difficult when you're not having a good day, you're not feeling well, you've had some challenges with work, or you haven't been able to hit certain milestones, financing doesn't come in. And then how do you communicate with the team? And at BRON, just because there's a multitude of projects that are going on at any point in time, in various stages, whether that's prep or pre-production, development, post-production, etc., is I look at what needs to be done. So really prioritizing is important. And my means of communication is email and text. And if there's a need to clarify what is most important, is pick up the phone. I know it's so simple. So as you know, is the back and forth on text, via email, text, email, whatever it is, it sometimes is tedious and it takes a long period of time. You pick up the phone and you can communicate better, and it only takes you a short period of time. And also is with text, as we know, is there's no emotion, so people don't sometimes understand the urgency, even if you say it is a priority. So really explaining, giving people clarity. And I'm also, I like to be sort of the one that brings solutions to the table. So I encourage those of my colleagues, my coworkers as well, and my collaborators, is if you see a problem, what would you do? What are the suggestions that you can make, given sometimes there's parameters of budgets and things like that. So in terms of communication and modes of communication, definitely picking up the phone, using email, using text, and then obviously Zoom has been very has been very popular during the pandemic as well, but some of us are kind of zoomed out.
I love that. Yeah, and with that in mind too, like as you mentioned earlier, you didn't have the plan per se of BRON becoming BRON, right? Going from a small office studio to a global giant. And that's almost like the reminder in tune with not only the communication and the team and what is the people management, the culture management, obviously the product, the quality of execution, but also just the day-to-day, how success is a lag indicator. It's easy for us at various levels to forget that the doing needs doing, and if maybe, for better or worse, if you did have a plan or didn't have a plan, oftentimes we forget that the success may or may not come. It comes in its time. But what would you say is your reminder or anchor, maybe then or at this point, or maybe was that kind of out of sight to keep you focused on what were the reps, what were your 1,000 hours of mastery, your scales, like a pianist would practice these mastery keys without worrying about, the reward and the recognition and the status and the success. How do you keep focus on managing the fact that success is a lag indicator, and success also can be, quantified at different metrics, right?
Yeah, and as you know, success is subjective to so many different people. Success can mean winning an Oscar to one person, and for another is finishing a script or getting out of bed. And so what keeps me focused and aligned, and moving forward is what Coretta Scott King had said is, do things for the cause, not for the applause. And I'm very passionate about giving voice and the storytelling behind underrepresented groups, and behind and in front of the camera, which is really, really important. That keeps me focused. So when I see that movies and storytelling and individuals are not getting the recognition that they need, I try to push for different projects like our Reggie Jackson project that's with Amazon right now. What was a really sort of turning point for BRON and for my husband and I, and it was the first time we actually attended the Oscars, was when Viola Davis accepted the award for Best Actress or Best Supporting Actress at the Oscars. And at that point in time, because she'd uttered the word BRON, people were looking us up. Just because it was on a very global stage, and everybody was watching, so and including ourselves being in the audience. So I think also at that time I realized how much it meant to have a woman of color on that stage who had worked for decades to get where she was, and she's definitely an icon for me because she had so much hardship. It wasn't just overnight that she was able to attain any type of success or get the opportunities that she could. And if you look at her role in How to Get Away with Murder, but also Woman King, and so many other things, like even in The Help, is she's a strong woman, but she's not somebody that you would actually see on screen that would be getting all the notoriety and the accolades and whatnot. So as we know, in the old adage is, if you can see it, you can be it. And that's really, really important because our on-screen realities become our off-screen realities.
That's so true. And it reminds me, just because you mentioned Viola, and I just rewatched it, the line on Fences, you got to take the crookeds with the straights, right? And that's always been this idea, I feel like, and this motivating factor for anybody that has, from an individual perspective to an organization, to both take the good with the bad. And as you mentioned, success being subjective, what could be a blessing at one point or what could be a curse is often like how we play those cards, right? And you alluded to it earlier. It's like that self-belief. How would you best describe, or how would you recommend, say, for any creative, any leader, to, if they can, obviously it's an individual journey in a lot of sense, but if they can, how do they transfer that belief onto maybe some of these causes, onto some of these individuals, onto some of these projects? Because you did the work yourself, we continue to do the work on ourselves, but oftentimes we also need to empower amazing creative talent or up-and-comers or causes that need that just lift or push. What is your approach, I guess, to transferring some of that, belief that is necessary to achieve that or to have that peace and support and growth?
I think for me is really finding people that understand what I'm trying to do. So when I look at a project, it's obviously, it starts with a story and how compelling it is, and if there's global resonance. Also, I look at the fact that who can I find? So a lot of times, and again during the pandemic, I was able to find people that really understood what I was trying to do, and also found that they were trying to do the same thing. So having that social impact within these particular projects, and really fighting for that as well, and trying to really educate people, or possibly having an educational curriculum to what you have, and I guess an accompanying piece. The other thing that's really important in terms of the sort of transfer of knowledge is how can you make it much more immersive as opposed to a passive experience. So some of the projects that we're doing at BRON, whether it's animation, whether it's narrative scripted, and we're leaning very heavily into music right now as well, and gaming, is saying, okay, what else can we do? So that it's to start a conversation, but also what else can we do to really propel people to become change agents, to really have fun with it. And it's not something that you want to sort of live and die with that content that you're consuming on whatever medium, whether it's your television screen or computer screen or phone or iPad. So I think those are really, really important things. And our tangent, actually, 2023 and beyond and pivoting, is really streamlining what we're doing. Like I said, to have that passive sort of experience, immersive experience as opposed to passive experience. And we're one of the few, I think, or I don't know any other company that's doing what we're doing, even on the gaming side of things. We're actually going to be immersing one of our properties with the support of Epic Games into Fortnite, and that's going to become live come April 10th. So I don't think that many companies are doing that, and also led by somebody that's a woman of color. Liz, when you asked me to do this podcast, if it was pre-pandemic, I probably would have said no. And not the reason because I didn't want to do it and just to say no and not have the time. It was more so as I had sort of the imposter syndrome of I haven't accomplished a lot. Am I good enough to be on a podcast? Am I able to be somebody that can be in a leadership role that really can vocalize what I say? And I also feel still to this day that I haven't accomplished enough. And there's still so much more that I could do. So this is very, very important for me because I want other people of color in particular, to see that things can be done if you really push it. You're able to find people that you can collaborate with, and that's through networking.
I love that. Yeah, and even through the years, during the pandemic, I think was the first time that we were able to get some Zoom FaceTime, and you mentioned that obviously with the downside of just the trauma maybe we went through and just the hardship of what that was. Not only was there the silver lining of us being able to connect and settle down to some aspect as we're highly productive, highly energetic, and just people that are always on the go. It forced us to slow down, and oftentimes if you have that drive, I found that's the hard part. I mentioned in a previous conversation how sometimes we need a coach, not to help us get better, but to actually slow us down, right? Of those of us that are high performers. And even then, you mentioned the stories that will come from the pandemic, the growth that a company, that an individual can make, the eyes that will be open to underrepresented communities are all silver linings, and yet there's still something that needs to be taken with some action, and some sort of initiative. And so it's people like you that I think maintain this sort of not just speaking it when it's cool, not just following through, but actually because you resonate so much with that at the level that, as a woman, as a person of color, as somebody who hasn't forgotten their roots, continues to kind of push that progress, and that's, again, incredibly inspiring. And I'll parlay that into kind of the next bit of the trajectory of this conversation, which I think is, with all that being said, how have you found the best practice? Because sometimes that same thing that fuels us is also our best friend or our worst enemy, right? It just is this insatiable hunger for enoughness, for more. It's a human experience. We all go through it. Greatness has been made behind it. Empires have fallen because of it. So how do you manage that enoughness and cultivate that sort of we are okay as a human, as a leader, we do the best we can? The idea that imposter syndrome is an ongoing thing that we either face or come to accept, and how do you, I guess, plan for moving forward within your professional career as a mother, as a leader, as an individual, a soul, an amazing, beautiful soul, to not get too in either extreme of, go, this is the thing that's going to prove us, right? As I often find myself striving as well, of when I get this, it'll be enough. And it's always a moving post. But also the fear of if we lose that, we won't have that fire, which is, we know intellectually sometimes it's a lie, but we've become accustomed to believe that. So do you have any best practices of how you manage that enoughness monster?
That's true. It's sometimes a blessing and a curse. Definitely the enoughness is, I go and think about my 5 guiding principles. My 5 P's is what I call it. And one is, what is my passion? Do I wake up in the morning and think I want to keep telling stories, whatever medium that may be on? And that's really, really important. What drives me, what gets me out of bed, what makes me feel content at night. And 2 is purpose. What is my intention? And keeping true to my intentions, keeping that, pathway. And we know that the pathway is not always straight and narrow. And sometimes there's rejection and that, as you know, can amount to sort of a redirection. That's how I look at everything. There's always a lesson to be learned, no matter how difficult, no matter how challenging, no matter how dark our days can be. And then my other P's are patience and perseverance, because in the entertainment industry, you have to keep going. You have to not give up. And if you fall down, you get up many times over, and sometimes you stumble, sometimes you stagger, and it's hard to be patient as well at this time. But the also volatility of the entertainment industry sort of allots us to have to become patient over time. And I do truly believe that good things come in time, and what is meant for you. And then my last P is poise. Is no matter what, no matter if you get rejected or things don't get, coming through in the way that you want it to, is to be poised. And that's really, really hard too. I think that if you show confidence, you exude confidence, I think that says a lot about you, despite the challenges, despite the craziness that's happening in your life. So those things sort of keep me in check. And also work-life balance. My family's first and foremost for me. So even if I'm away, I talk to my children almost every day. My son is in New York, and I talk to him at least twice a week. And FaceTiming. I don't miss major events around my children. So graduation, I actually missed a premiere. Actually, I missed the Loudmouth premiere at Tribeca. It was closing night film, which is a big deal, because my daughter was graduating, and that's more important to me. So really looking and focusing on what's important in my life, staying true to that. And, on the sort of work side of things is really showing appreciation for my colleagues when we hit milestones, when we hit things that have been, really, really challenging. We never thought we could do it, but we did it. And as we know, if it was easy, then everybody would be doing it. And those wins are so meaningful, because you know that the obstacles that you had to, the hurdles that you had to jump over, were so difficult, and yet here you are and you've done it.
I love that. So I'll wrap with that and kind of highlight and go over an overview of our conversation and some takeaways, and you fill in wherever I missed. So I'll start backwards. The 5 guiding principles, which sounds like there may be 6 P's, which that last one is maybe praising, right? Like giving some sort of praise to the team from that aspect. But the patience, perseverance, passion, purpose, and poise, 2 that stood out for me, and as a reminder to our listeners, is that idea of poise, to me also resonates with grace, right? Like trusting gracefully within oneself, within mistakes, within things that are beyond our control, within failures, to have the grace to still move forward. And I think that aligns with poise. And again, like the principle of perseverance and purpose, I like the saying of, and it sounds like you live by this too, can I continue to do this in the next 10 years, as a 30-year-old, 40-year-old, 50-year-old, and this being the important thing to you, storytelling and generating this sort of impact and activation maybe through some of that narrative that is your craft. For me, it's the same thing, helping businesses to activate. For an author, it may be to just write. And then whatever other accoutrements or things come of it are almost like side, the cherry on top, as long as we're doing that thing. And the other thing I would touch on is just the networking, the maintaining connection with individuals and making sure that we understand it takes a tribe. And then the lag indicator, remembering that, I love that, it's the cause, not the applause. So remembering how and what we do and the reps that are required for that thing being what's important instead of the end result that we often get lost on. Is there anything that I missed in there? I feel like that covers what really stood out for me. Anything you want to add on?
I think you're very thorough in your summation of it. So it's good that you took all that, and hopefully that will be, really helpful. I think for me, Lewis, is that, you and I are from an underrepresented group. And I think that what I've learned about myself in the last few years in particular is that I want to be a good example to people, and I also want to make sure that it's important to look at the whole spectrum. So looking at young people, looking at ageism, looking at colorism also, which is really important, but also looking at intersectionality that we don't always look at, and I can always do better. We have to also look at suicide. We have to look at PTSD. We have to look at depression and anxiety, which is also on the rise right now, because a lot of times people are not given hope. And it's not that the doors are closed to us. It's more so that the doors are locked. So what do? We don't have the key to this, so we have to make our own buildings. We have to make our own doors, that there's accessibility to people. So you just don't come into the front hallway or the reception area of a building. You'll have opportunity to go into each room, into each boardroom, and making sure that the table is enough to accommodate all of us.
I love that. Thank you so much, Brenda. And you've been an inspiration. You're definitely a walking example to show us that we can build these new buildings and open doors and, at any level find this sort of inspiration and having somebody that looks like us, that understands us, and that also understands that all of us are one, right? And as cliche as that is, as woo-woo as it is, we're all these connected individuals in the art of what's going on today.
Yeah, they can come to our website or they can come to my Instagram account. So one of the things I think Lucy, you and I had actually talked about early on in the pandemic is I had actually reached a very dark place and wasn't particularly happy during lockdown in April of 2020. I actually did a 360 and really realized that I was not lacking for anything. I had a roof over my head. I had food on my table. And what I decided to do at that time was, if I was feeling this way and I had everything that I needed and everything that I had around me, then other people were thinking and feeling 10 times, 100 times worse than me. So since April of 2020, I always try to put out, or I haven't missed a day of putting out some sort of post, some sort of quote that can really help motivate, inspire, and help individuals to move forward in their lives.
I love that. And definitely seeing the impact of that and that intention is felt. So thank you so much, Brenda. Until next time, and chat soon.
Thank you so much. It was a wonderful conversation.